and let us all do we can to build a better future.
I'm really going to enjoy talking about this. I'm really going to enjoy talking about this. Liberals are panicking, Pasta. Liberals are crying now, and I'm eating it up. I love it because when I see stuff like this, I can't help but wonder, hey, Bernie, you nutless wonder, you lousy cuck. This is what it kind of looks like, you know, when you want to fight for your campaign and your people. Now, I want to be clear on this, all right? I have said before, I'm going to support independence and third party. Now, I'm going to be covering the Democratic primary as well because I want to document everything that's going to happen. But right off the bat, something I would never see in 2016 or in 2020, seeing a presidential candidate in a primary saying that they will not support the incumbent or the winner of the nomination. RFK Jr. won't commit to supporting Biden if he loses primary. Case in point, and I know you covered this possibly yesterday with the outstanding Jose Vega. Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Wednesday wouldn't commit to supporting President Biden if the incumbent beats him in the party's 2024 primary. Asked at News Nation town hall event by Elizabeth Vargas whether he pledged to support whoever wins the Democratic nomination, Kennedy said, "Of course I'm not going to do that. So if you don't get the nomination, you won't support President Biden?" Vargas asked. "I don't know what I'll do," Kennedy said. Let's see what happens in this campaign. Let's see what if people are living up to Democratic values and having debates and having discussions and, you know, talking to each other. But I'm not going to bite, which is something I wanted to hear Bernie say. But Bernie, being the nutless, spineless, soulless wonder that he is, could never do that. Now, again, to be clear here, you could hear in the background liberals crying. You could see all the people at BSDNC and CNN being triggered. I want to pull up this video clip from News Nation, which shows firsthand the aftermath coverage. Now, I
do have that clip really quickly. It's under a minute, and I have it ready if you want to hear it too as well, of him actually saying that I won't. Of course, I'm not going to do it. I have that, so it's ready.
It's also in here too. So let's go ahead and
my bad. I'll shut up. I'll let you run the show.
Sorry, all right, let's bring in the star of the night. News Nation's.
By the way, how the hell does Cuomo even still have a job?
Elizabeth Vargas did a very difficult job and did it very, very well. I've seen a lot of these town halls, my friend, and you got a lot of depth and breadth out of the situation tonight with those for the voters with you and all across the country. How'd it feel?
Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you, my friend. And it was an interesting night. You know, it was interesting hearing your conversation just now with James, because that was by far the most tense moment of the hour-and-a-half town hall. He had a really tough question for Bobby Kennedy Jr. and really followed up on that and said, "I'm sorry, blaming your staff doesn't cut it. Why did you agree to speak for this group, Moms for Liberty? They were up advertising. You saw their picture, the picture of Bobby Kennedy, Moms for Liberty, all over social media for quite some time before he finally canceled that appearance. So it was a tough exchange. It was really interesting to watch. It was the one really, I think, close to real uncomfortable moment in there. That and maybe when a few of the doctor in the audience that was challenging him on vaccines and saying, what you're doing is crazy. How do we bring you, the doctor said, back to the side of science, and Robert Kennedy Jr. thought he said, back to your senses. The interesting thing I thought, Chris, I'm not sure what your highlights were, but I found it very interesting that he refused to pledge to back whoever the Democratic nominee of the party is.
Which is something I wanted to see Bernie, Yang, and Tulsi do in the 2020 primary. Now, that didn't happen. It was stupid. Everyone's signing that document. Now, the video clip will be playing here. But, Pasta, when you heard those words, when RFK Jr. said, "I'm not going to support Biden," what are your thoughts?
I kind of expected it because it's a different situation, right? It's the last time when these guys signed the pledge, they agreed because the DNC was facilitating the primary process. In other words, the primaries themselves are run by the state, but to have debates and go on the road and get the coverage and do all the things and have these events, like, in New Hampshire, the DNC facilitated a joint event where it was all the Democrats, all the candidates were there, and they got to speak in front of at the basketball stadium there one by one. And, of course, they had their debates. So that was why the pledge was signed. They're not doing that time, so there is no pledge. And if they did make everybody sign a pledge kit, you can still turn around. RFK can turn around and go, you know what? I'm not going to honor this pledge because you didn't honor a fair process. And you can get a lawyer and you can fight that and probably say, the hell with you. I'm not going to nominate you. I'm going to either, support the other guy. I'm going to support Cornel West. I'm going to support the Libertarian candidate. Or maybe I'm going to run independent. But the thing that people are missing with this whole subject, it is not so much the pledge that he's got to be loyal to. It's the sore loser laws. Some states have sore loser laws, and it's kind of on the border if they're constitutional, unconstitutional. Florida's one of those states. I think there's like 12 states that have Democratic sore loser laws that if you run as a Democrat, you are not still allowed. If you run as a Democrat in the primary, you're not allowed to run as an independent or another party in the general. And they can be tested. And I think people have to pay more attention to those rather than this whole pledge, like, oh, they're going to do the pledge and stuff. Now, if there was a pledge and they say, hey, we're going to facilitate some debates, let's say Joe Biden, as Steve would always say, steps on a rainbow, and they get him out of there and they get Gavin Newsom in. Now they can have some debates. They can do some things. And then they make these guys sign a pledge. I would be a little concerned there because RFK has shown in the past he can be a good little Democrat, that he's loyal to the Democrat. He supported Hillary Clinton. I think a lot of his rhetoric for years were just him being a good Democrat and kind of shutting his mouth. I think the COVID situation blew the doors open for him, and he's like, well, you know what? No more. Now I'm going to speak my mind. Now I'm going to push back. Now I'm going to expose them for what they are. There was a lot of surprising things there, but it didn't surprise me too, Kid, because he also said, I don't see myself supporting anybody who supports war.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Now, I do want to play the rest of this because, again, and we still got a couple more highlights for RFK Jr.'s town hall here in Chicago. And just a side note, I did try to attend this event. However, I was told they don't want any other media outlets there at the event. They might have been afraid I would have raised the ruckus. I did politely ask if yours truly could attend, and the answer was a resounding no.
Hey, Kit,
I think
that's why we got to do what I'm about to do, because if they start shutting us out, we start speaking as a voice together, as a coalition, Sabby, you, Sfee, everybody we know at IRN, all those people, we got to get together on this and make sure they can't shut us out of the room anymore. We need to make sure that we get in the room from now on in, because that's it. It's enough is enough. We got to do this. And I think that's why it's important. I think it's bullshit that they didn't let you at least attend, and maybe there wasn't a press conference after. I find that a little hard to believe, but what are you going to do?
Hey, it is what it is. Whatever. I mean, hey, it's just something I find a little bit hilarious.
In fact, we have a clip
let's play
of me asking him that, because he talked all about being, okay, let's play it. As a lifelong Democrat, as you just said very passionately, will you pledge to support whoever the Democratic nominee is, whoever it is, whether it's you, whether it's President Biden?
Oh, of course I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to
do that.
No, of course I'm not. Listen,
if you don't get the nomination, you won't support President Biden?
I don't know what I'll do. Let's see let's see what happens in this campaign. Let's see, what if people are living up to democratic values and having debates and having discussions and, talking to each other, but I'm not going to buy.
And if you feel that's not happening, would you then support a Republican or run as an independent?
You know what? My plan is to win this election, and I don't have a plan B.
He's
okay. And so I want to pause it there because when we look at that kind of conversation, you could already hear so many people who are vote blue no matter who being triggered. Perhaps collectively they all crap their pants, to which I have to say I'm glad that they're starting to panic, because nobody's going to be a kind little person. Now, the thing is, let's be clear here, folks. RFK Jr. is part of a part of the Democratic Party. He wants to regain his party back from the establishment, so it's a switch off one establishment for another. But again, anything can happen during this primary. Now, I hope he's consistent and doesn't retract that statement, because I think for many of us who have been screwed over by the Bernie Sanders movement. To me, that was refreshing to hear. And plus seeing all the people on social media starting to vilify RFK Jr., just like they're vilifying Dr. Cornel West, who's running in the Green Party. I'm embracing this. I'm embracing this anger and fear that the Vote Blue No Matter Who are finally having, because their whole mindset of chastising or talking down to voters, it's not going to work this time around. Before we pull up this next segment, I mean, even rewatching that segment from last night, I mean, do you think it can resonate to probably get in more support? Because at the end of the day, I know you guys at the Convo Couch and Nico House was Mi Casa Su Casa were able to get receipts on the DNC committing election fraud, not only during the 2016 primary, but in the 2020 primary as well. Go ahead, Paso. You got to unmute your mic, buddy.
Yeah, if you look at these elections and you understand them, how they work, you can see there was a lot of mathematical impossibilities. Unfortunately, people call them anomalies, and that anomaly word was enough to manufacture consent from, shit libs and progressives on the left, that all they cared about was the results. They were so blinded by TDS of hating Donald Trump. And there's a lot of reasons to not like Donald Trump. He's not my favorite guy over the last couple of weeks. He said some stuff that has just been blowing my mind. But you got to understand that at the end of the day, and I think you know this, but more than anybody, because you've covered elections too, as well as on the ground, if you have a tainted process and the process is at the hands of the establishment, in other words, they hold all the keys to the kingdoms and control the rules, and you go and you manufacture consent for this last election, you're never going to win an election yourself as a grassroots candidate. These election laws that they put in place that everybody was like, no, it's okay, it was legit, it was all right, it was okay, and didn't question it at all because they hated Donald Trump, is going to affect them. They're never going to get a grassroots candidate in. And every single time they run and the numbers don't make sense, well, remember that you acquiesce to a system that is worthy of looking at. And it's not us who was the first one to look at this, right? The Democrats themselves said they were looking at these things quite some time. There's election integrity activists who've been complaining about elections since the birth of elections out there. They say there's never been a proper election. So as one who's seen fair elections overseas and in Nicaragua, where I'll be in a couple of weeks celebrating with the Sandinistas and the revolution against the Contras, which was a CIA-funded civil war of sorts, when you see fair elections, it's very easy to get it fixed. One thing he said last night about the border, right, and that's where he's going to get some controversy today from a lot of people on the left, is we can easily fix this. We can fix this, right? Well, we can do the same things for elections if we wanted to, right? And he has said, moving forward, instead of going back and saying this person won or lost, let's just look at the process, because citizens have a right to complain about the process itself. And, that's the whole thing. While we're talking about this, we have all these conversations. Fee will always say at the very end, and what does all this matter anyways? We don't have fair elections over here, so it doesn't really even make a difference anyways, right? It's all hogwash. But, we have ways to show it. We have ways to prove it. And we have a plan on how to push it,
Agreed. So I want to, speaking of the media, what I found interesting, especially watching the aftermath of the town hall that took place here in Chicago, which again, I'm glad that RFK Jr. has been given the chance to do a town hall. I hope that Dr. Cornel West is given that opportunity, if not by News Nation, then by Fox News or anybody else. I hope that Dr. Cornel West is invited for the Twitter Space event like Elon Musk did for RFK Jr. I think we need to hear more of this dissenting voices against the Democratic establishment, and yes, against even the Republican establishment. But what was interesting to me is that during this town hall as well, not only did RFK Jr. indicate, and again, much to the shock and horror to the Vote Blue No Matter Who people, that he won't support the nominee or Biden, they're also having him try and attack Trump. Now, look, it's easy to attack Donald Trump. Trump is an easy target. But I think, again, what the primary concern for anybody running in a Democratic primary is you're supposed to knock out your opponents in the primary so you're ready for the big leagues. And that means, going after, said establishment and said politicians. Now, I wasn't a fan of RFK Jr. saying, hey, Biden's a good friend of the family. It's very reminiscent to Bernie saying, my friend Joe. But here he is being talked about whether or not he's going to attack Donald Trump and how Trump supporters like RFK Jr. And to be clear here, too, because I also want to note this as well, on Revolutionary Blackout Network, not once but twice in 2 interviews, Dr. Cornel West said that he is going to be going into Trump country to talk to Trump voters. And look, here's the real truth. Those Trump voters do turn out, and they have been consistent in supporting their guy. But what the media has failed to do, and even failed to acknowledge, is that if you really talk to some of these other Trump supporters, they know that Trump's an idiot and buffoon, but they would prefer him over any kind of hack, fraud, Democratic establishment dog. Let's play this video.
You say that you're a Democrat, but you're getting a lot of support from a lot of leading voices on the right, like Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, former President Donald Trump. Many Democrats fear that you're a spoiler in the race, that you will damage President Biden in the primary and grease the skids for former President Trump to return to the Oval Office. This week, former President Trump said about you, Kennedy is smart and he's a common sense guy. What kind of man do you think Donald Trump is?
Well, here's what I'm not going to do in this race. I'm not going to attack other people personally. I don't think it's good for our country. And I think, what I'm trying to do in this race is bring people together, is to try to bridge the divide between Americans. And guess what? When my dad died and we took this train ride from, this 7.5-hour train ride that was supposed to be 2 hours, and I was with him when he died in Los Angeles. And then we brought his body from New York, Penn Station to Union Station and Washington, D.C. And it was a 2.5-hour ride, but it took 7.5 hours because there were 2.5 million people on that train track. And it was a cross-section of America, and all of the major urban stations in Trenton, Newark, Wilmington, and Baltimore. There were Black Americans singing Battle Hymn of the Republic. There were whites in the rural areas who are holding up signs, "Goodbye, Bobby, pray for us, Bobby," American flags, standing, saluting. 4 years later, and they had supported my father in the primaries in 1968. 4 years later, in 1972, they were not supporting my father, and they were not supporting George McGovern, who was aligned with my father on all these issues. Instead, the vast majority of them were supporting George Wallace. And my father was able to harness these populist energies. In the last day of his life, he won the most rural state in this country, South Dakota, and the most urban. He was able to bridge the divide among people who would otherwise be Republican, but wanted somebody who was common sense, who was able to appeal to.
I want to pause it here real quick. Look, Convo Couch has talked about this. Hardlands Media has talked about this. Nico House has talked about this. Jimmy Dore, Revolutionary Blackout Network, and even the crew at INN. Now, I know each of us started at different points in times, but I can definitely state this with absolute ego, pride, and confidence. All of us have said universally the same thing. Politics 101, especially in electoral politics, and I know a lot of us are burnt out by electoral politics. The whole idea of winning an election is convincing voters that you are the better of the candidates. That means also talking to voters who would vote independent or Republican, Green or Libertarian. You're supposed to say like, hey, I am the better champion. Trust in me, and I will listen to your concerns, and I will build a strong coalition. I mean, that's electoral politics 101. But see, in this day and age of neoliberalism and corporate media, you cannot talk to Republican voters because they're the bad guys. You cannot talk to Democratic voters. They're the bad guys. Don't talk to those third-party people and independents. They're fringe. They're out there. Everyone, stay in your safe spaces. Don't talk to your friends, neighbors, or loved ones. Everyone is an enemy. Shut up and follow orders, which is, again, I find this refreshing to hear. And I hope RFK Jr. and everyone else that is running in this election, especially those that are challenging the Democratic and Republican establishment, are consistent. Continuing on.
Their idealism, who was able to find the hero in each of them, who was able to get them to transcend narrow self-interest and see themselves as part of a community and part of this, incredible American adventure in modeling self-governance for the rest of the world. And so I'm proud that President Trump likes me, even though I don't agree with him on most of his issues. Because I don't want to alienate people. I want to bring people together. I'm proud that all these people like me and that I have independent supporters and Democratic supporters and that I'm able to bring a lot of people. You know, every Democrat says, I want to end the polarization. But how do you do that without talking to people who don't agree with you? How do you do that without appealing to people? Without my purpose is to find the issues, the values that we have in common, rather than, you know, focus on the issues and the personalities that keep us all apart.
And again, corporate media has really contributed in keeping us divided. Now, I want to hand this over to you, Pasta, because again, we have been vilified. And I know in the early days of Hard Lens Media, I was yelled at by people by saying, don't interview libertarians, don't interview Greens, you should interview these people. And I want to point out a lot of those people who were saying that to me were activists and social justice warriors. But whenever I interviewed those said activists and social justice warriors, you know, I got messages from people saying you shouldn't interview them or this. Now, I run a show and I have interviews. I interview activists, politicians, candidates, other content creators. That's Show Running 101. You got to have an interesting show and have interesting guests. Now, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of things Pasta and I don't agree with, right? But guess what? I'm going to talk to him. What is this whole new concept of, hey, talking to somebody that might think differently than you? Yeah. Pasta, what is it like now seeing that firsthand? I mean, the thing is, Dr. Cornel West has been saying that same message, talk to other people, reach out to the other side. He's going to be vilified for talking to Trump supporters. But now RFK Jr. is getting the same treatment too, but he pushed back against that. And so is Dr. Cornel West. Your thoughts?
Well, I think we should establish right off the bat that this is what Dr. Cornel West is not being able to do, which RFK is doing, right? You know,
okay.
he says
Can
he's
you
not going to
elaborate
go
on that?
after anybody, huh?
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Just a little bit.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
The fact is that even though Cornel West says he wants to go into Trump land and talk to Trumpers, the language is not there. He's not setting himself up to get any ears and eyes to open up to him. And it's one of the first questions I asked him in our election. In our interview, and I said, how are you going to reach out to Trumpers when you consistently call him a neo-fascist, which is a very strong word? Because when you say he's a neo-fascist, you're saying that people are supporting a neo-fascist. They don't want to hear it. That's a buzzword that a lot of these social justice warriors use. We got to stop fascism. We got to stop the impending fascism. And I argue that Joe Biden is more of a fascist, true fascist by the definition of the word corporatism, where the state merges with the corporations. That Joe Biden is way more of a fascism, and yet Cornell lets him off the hook by saying he's a neo-liberal disaster. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's kind of justify that whole push to once again, you know, vote for Biden, push him to the left, which they haven't admitted, which is the wrong choice. Hey, look, I'm never going to vote for either one of these two, but you can easily look at the records. We're close to World War III right now with Joe Biden, and that's scary. But getting back to this,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to say that Cornel West is not doing what he is doing here. That's the beauty of RFK. He's talking to people on both sides of the aisle. He's doing that. Right now, Cornel is only peeling away from the people who didn't want to vote for Biden but voted for him because they thought that Trump was that bad and they don't want to do it again. So they have another option right there. They have a true progressive guy, you know, and even though Cornel West was one to say, go talk to people differently than you, the language he's used, and now part of his team, Chris Hedges the other day, that's what the whites do. You're not going to be able to go talk to these people that you say you want to talk to unless you change rhetoric. And I don't see that from the campaign. Also, if you don't have a knowledge of what's going on during the COVID crisis, during the whole protocol situation, the vaccines, the rollouts, the history, Dr. Fauci himself, you're not going to get these people's attentions. So right now, Cornel West, and it's a shame that you see a lot of independent media, our brothers and sisters in independent media, just go directly attack RFK for his Israeli stance, which I believe is awful. I think it's terrible. And I was really even so surprised when David Smith, the libertarian, who people were kind of saying he might be the libertarian person to run, but he's high up in the Mises caucus. We don't know yet. They wouldn't tell me who's going to be their candidate. When he even says, hey, I think that Cornel West is a better candidate because he's better on Israel. You know what I'm saying? That goes a long way, but it doesn't go far enough. And it's not what these people are concentrated on. In fact, a lot of these conservatives will protect Israel and they'll provide cover for Israel, despite their unjust and brutal bombing and killing of the Palestinians. So Cornel West needs to get better on this right over here. RFK removed a meme, a tweet over last weekend, where he had like a bazooka of Joe Biden firing a bazooka, but it went backwards and hit Uncle Sam and got him all smoky and fire. Somebody in the campaign must have said, we're not going to do personal attacks. And that's smart right away. He hasn't attacked Cornel West the way West and Chris Hedges have attacked him, and the independent media, our friends, have attacked him, and I think that's good, because I don't think it's good that they attack him, hold him accountable. But remember, we got to build a coalition no matter what at the end of the day. And it's got to be, not just a coalition where RFK is going to be able to go in there and get some of those independents leaning right, but a coalition with Cornel West, and a coalition with whether it comes out of the Libertarian Party. But this is something that, and something, let me say something, Kit. He's also talking to those people that are still proud to be an American, right? Like, people ask me, do you love your country? You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, well, I don't know. That's a trick question, because I don't love my country's government, but I do love my countrymen.
The idea. Let's actually elaborate, because I do want to add into this, because here's the thing. There's the idea of liking the idea of what we could be, but the politicians who are running it causes us to have much disdain. I think there should be a separation. Do you like the government, or exactly? Because again, but this whole thing, especially for third parties, I understand Dr. Cornel West's messaging. Perhaps he could improve upon it, because again, you attract more flies with honey than with vinegar. But we have to look at how we describe our politicians, because again, Dr. Cornel West calling Trump a neo-fascist, which again is a strong word. The same words can also be applied to, again, Joe Biden, because he's again very in tune, in line with that same kind of description of Trump. And both Biden and Trump are one the same. The only difference is that Trump has served less in politics and doesn't have a monumental more than a decade long career in politics like Joe Biden has. But with running as a third party candidate, perhaps maybe you have to use some of these strong words to really describe these politicians, and calling Biden a, well, milquetoast neoliberal nobody, a mediocre neoliberal, then that could work, because maybe it causes people to ask questions. But looking at how RFK Jr. Is trying to run this campaign of not attacking his opponents, it can work to a certain point. But then you do have to go on the attack, because politics, and look, this goes for third party candidates too, because they have to be aggressive. And I feel that that's a necessary thing that third party candidates need to do, because every time they have played it nice, and look, I respect Dr. Jill Stein, I respect Gary Johnson for what they did, but you need to have a warlike mindset. And in this day and age of social media, the quoting due dissidents, hey, it's show running 101. You have to say, hey, this is what I'm saying. You have to be on that loudspeaker to maybe get the ears and the eyeballs. And for the most part, again, people don't like what you say. People may not like how you word it. But if you give a person a minute to explain their reasoning, then it causes more people to ask questions. So I think we could talk more about that. And I do want to have a conversation on that. But I want to pull up another video here where we're talking about.
Can I say one thing about what you just said there really quickly? Because I think it's important. RFK is in a good position, right? Until he has a debate with Cornel West, or a debate with Marianne Williamson, or a libertarian, if that ever happens.
That's not happening with Marianne Williamson.
Well,
her campaign is done. Come on.
If somebody puts together a debate, let's say a cross-party debate where they have the libertarian candidate, the RFK, and Cornel West, and there's like three people debating, that's going to be a little bit different, right? But when it comes to Joe Biden and Donald Trump, he never has to attack them personally. He can always attack their policy or their decision makings. They've made it in the past, which has led to this disastrous moment we're in right now, where everybody's economically broke. We're on the brink of World War III. You can attach Trump to this situation, the way he continued to fund Nazis, and fund the Ukrainians. So, I mean, there's just different ways to do it. He missed an opportunity yesterday when he was asked about Hunter Biden, because he took the high road and said, listen, I don't know the guy. I'm not going to attack him, but any addict, I pray for them. I hope they get better. I was an addict myself, so I hope he gets better. But really, to tell you the truth, what we should be talking about, the fact is that his father, Joe Biden, passed the crime bill. And what that did to addicts and lock them up and calling them super predators, that's what we need to do. He can always go and attack the policies and the decision makings from both Biden and Donald Trump. He has that room to do it. And that's how he has to take the gloves off. by saying it's disastrous policy, but he's not going to go after these people directly. It's not his cup of tea.
All right, it's understandable, but again, if you're running as a third party candidate, I understand, and I actually do approve of being aggressive and going on the attack, especially if it's right now 2023. That's something all the candidates should do, including RFK Jr. Look, Biden is showing absolute weakness, and I say this to everyone: RFK Jr. supporters, yes, Marianne Williamson supporters, Cornel West supporters, Libertarian supporters, and yes, even the Trump supporters. Biden is weak. You don't need me to tell you that. I played the video clips. He is weak, and the Democratic Party helped boost that guy up. But what I do find concerning, not concerning, but more of, I guess, interesting. RFK Jr. was asked how to reclaim his party, how to reclaim the party back. What is the Democratic Party? And I don't know if it truly was the way he's describing it. One of my purposes in running is to remind the Democratic Party of what we're supposed to represent. So I want to play this video and have a discussion on this. And this will be the final video on this. But look, there's been so many attempts to try and reform the Democratic Party, and it's failed miserably. Case in point, Bernie and AOC, which is a whole other bag of worms. Can of worms.
Your father and uncle were heroes in the Democratic Party. Would they be considered Democrats today? And are you shocked by how you're being treated by the Democrats and their media?
I'm not happy about it, but I'm not shocked. I know, people get subsumed in orthodoxies. I believe that the values that I am trying to promote are the exact values that my father and my uncle would have promoted. And I've, written books about my family. I've studied them. I have, the more that I've studied my family, the more I've written and researched them, my uncle and my father, the more proud I am of them. And I have devoted my life to promoting the same kind of values that I think they promoted. And I'm trying to, one of my purposes in running is to remind the Democratic Party of, what we are supposed to represent and what we've always represented. And, people have said to me, why don't you run as an independent? And I say, because I'm a Democrat. This is who I am. This is my identity, but I want my party back. I want my party to be the party that I grew up in, the party of John Kennedy, the party of Robert Kennedy, the party of FDR and Harry Truman.
It all sounds good on paper, but the Democratic Party that he's describing is probably the mythos, the legend of what it was, the idea, when you have the rose-colored glasses on. And I, too, was victim of that, seeing the Democratic Party as, quote-unquote, a workers' party or caring about social issues. But, again, all the best to him for trying to do that. But just check out what remains of Justice Democrats' brand new Congress and our revolution. They tried to do that too, got quickly co-opted, or were just pushed out of the way. Look at the Congressional Progressive Caucus, mediocre at best. This whole idea of trying to reclaim the Democratic Party or make it into something else, in many ways, was a fool's errand. I do hope that from this primary, we see the implosion of the Democratic Party. That's what I want to see. I want people to see just how inherently corrupt the DNC is, because we know that they commit election fraud. We know what they did in 2016 and in 2020, and they're going to be playing the same game again in 2024. They've already admitted it. They already said they're going to dismiss the Iowa and New Hampshire delegation. This whole idea of trying to reignite hope for the Democratic Party, it's to me, it is something that could build up a false hope. But knowing how primaries play out, even in the scenario of RFK Jr. winning the Democratic primary, the DNC has it within their power as a private entity to still go in for Biden and dismiss all of RFK Jr.'s wins. So is this something that RFK Jr. is trying to do just to cause a complete chaos and destruction? Is he prepared to fully go all the way? Because that's what I want to see, the full revelation and destruction of the Democratic Party as it being revealed that it doesn't care what its voters think. Pasta, your thoughts.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, this is just lip service right now because we have a different Democratic Party than when his father was running to be the president or his uncle held the office of president. We have a different voter. We have a different society. We have a different workforce. We have a different everything. And I really do think that I'm hoping that this comes to a situation where he goes, okay, listen, I gave my best shot. I tried, I ran an honest campaign and I didn't get an honest primary. Instead, I got cheated. And we know this, and it's obvious the way they tried to cheat Bernie Sanders, they tried to cheat me too as well. So I think it's time to walk away. So I'm hoping that he does come to fruition and say, is enough is enough. He finds political Jesus of sorts. Yeah, it's time to walk away. But, in the meantime, in between time, I'm still glad that he's running as a Democrat because, unfortunately, society is plagued with this red team, blue team mentality, this football mentality when it comes to our politics. But now he gets to keep the heat on the Democratic Party the whole time. And the Democratic Party has to answer to him. They can just pretty much just ignore Dr. Cornel West unless somebody brings it up in a conversation or an interview, when faced. And that will be very few and far between because we know that the mainstream media is a captured industry. This way, when he's on the inside, he can really take it and put the heat to the Democratic Party. So for us to get what we want, that implosion, this needs to happen. This is actually a good thing. I was totally against it at first because I never want to support a Democrat ever again because I know what that party is all about. But, I said this yesterday on the show with Jose Vega before we get started. Don't think that things can be different. They also have the politicians and the judges in their pockets, all the elites and the ruling class. But Bernie Sanders didn't fight for that lawsuit that was filed by Jared Beck. Okay. He acquiesced to the DNC during the convention. He said, let's suspend the rules and by acclamation, let's give it to Hillary Clinton, which he made that case moot. RFK can do something different this time. I'm going to be on RFK's ass talking about elections, talking about everything. Just I'll be on Cornel West's ass talking about these things. So, this is what's necessary for it to happen, for it to blow up inside. I understand what he's saying. At the end of the day, we just got to take it with a grain of salt and realize that, hey, man, this is the path he's choosing. He's running for president, not you. And, you can make that decision if you don't want to support him. You don't want to send money because of those reasons. I get it. I'm not going to hold it against you. But I think it is an actual good thing that he's running within that Democratic Party only to hold the feet of the DNCs to the fire, their flames.
Here's my final note for this. I am impressed with the town hall that RFK Jr. was able to hold and that he was able to push back against the moderator and be in control of the conversation. My views on this election cycle are pretty optimistic and not in, oh my goodness, we're going to bring in change. It's more of, I think people are starting to rage out against the system as they should. What I will say to anyone who watches the show, I will not tell you how to vote. It is up to you and your choice on where you want to vote, whether it's for Republican, Democrat, Independent, etc. What I want to see at the end of the day, and yes, Hardlands Media will be covering the Democratic Convention here in Chicago in 2024. We will be there on the ground. I want to see a contested convention, and I encourage RFK Jr. Supporters, if you're going to go all the way and run the Democratic Party, I will not vote Democrat, and I will not do that. I will not do that again. If you're going to be serious about RFK Jr. going all the way, document and note everything. Look at what they did to Tulsi and Bernie in 2020. Look at what they did to Bernie in 2016. Document and note everything, and make it a contested convention. Burn the DNC to the ground if need be. Blow it up. But you got to be consistent, and I hope RFK Jr. will go all the way. And yes, I will hold his feet to the fire, and I know, Pasta, you've done some groundbreaking interviews too. You'll do the same. But I also want to throw this out here to independents and third-party candidates. Yes, we have to hold them accountable for the way they speak to voters and what they're running on. It's about being consistent and holding these people who are running for office accountable. However, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who sits on the throne. What matters is the mindset and the heart of the American people. Because for too long, all of us, and I don't care which state you live in and what generation you're part of, we've all been stepped on by the neoliberal establishment. And for too long, the group that has been dismissed the most by Washington, D.C. has been all of us together. And they have successfully brainwashed a lot of us to hate each other, to stay divided. I encourage people to walk outside your safe space. Not only just take the words of RFK Jr. or Cornel West or anybody else. No, walk outside your safe space and actually talk to people. You may not win all conversations, and hell, people may not want to talk to you at all. But it's a start. And this election cycle, I hope, is a great awakening up to the fact that we are all suffering by politicians who don't care. It is up to us to fight for that better future, and we need to start doing it now.